Here. Thank you for tuning in. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. And get that right there. Okay, we should be live on the Patreons, on the YouTubes, and on the Twitches, which means we are live. Thanks for tuning in to another Monday morning tech chat show. Of course, another Monday morning tech chat show on a Tuesday. I hope everyone had, in the United States, I should say, everyone had a lovely Memorial Day weekend, that you got to shove some delicious food in your face, all over your face. I'm a very face-first kind of eater, and that you got to spend some time with family and friends, people you care about, people who care about you. I had a really lovely Monday. Was hanging out with a cousin and ate way too many hot dogs, and that's kind of the jam. I think that was a decent Memorial Day weekend achieved. I did have a bird poop all over my LG V30, so that was legit disgusting. And, we can kind of bat around the bush on things like, water resistance, and it's not a make or break feature. But it is one of those features that definitely comes in handy when you need it. So yeah, I got to give a shout out to the phone companies out there making our phones more lifestyle durable. I'm already seeing some people in the chat, seeing Renato Laporte, I'm seeing Fat Produce, I'm seeing Chris Moran, I'm seeing James Vincent, Aditya, Ruri. This is some good times, guys. We got some news stories to catch. Of course, the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show is all about spending a little bit more time with some of the news stories that pop up during the week. We get the weekend to kind of recuperate from the barrage of news. So much of it a bit frustrating or a bit negative, and I get a bit ranty on stuff like that. And then we come back fresh, start off our tech week right, and really dig into some of the nuts and bolts on what's going on here. The Fat Produce, did the bird poo make the glass back look any better? No. And my phone was face up. So, I mean, like, I wasn't going to have this out on a picnic bench, but I had this face up, and it, like, gunked, like, all over the bottom corner right there. So it was pretty gross. Again, just in the line of work that I'm in, it was really nice having the G7 that I'm reviewing. It had my Project Fi Sim in, which I turn on and turn off as I'm reviewing phones. And it was nice, like, okay, well, can't use this phone. I'll just have to use this phone. I totally love this. This is my line of work, that I almost always have a backup phone at the ready. You know, like Mr. Mobile, back in the day when he was producing on Pocket Now, went by the Twitter handle Captain Two Phones. And yeah, I very much exemplify always walking around with two phones. From Ruri, I've got a bad hangover today and it's too warm. Oh, buddy. See, we've been having the opposite problem. It's actually been surprisingly cool, which is making everyone in the valley here in Los Angeles nervous that, that we're going to get rocked with some really terrible weather. Speaking of, just a little housekeeping, that's actually been one of the things that's been kind of difficult to sort of sort out, to get around. I'm in the middle of reviewing the LG G7. I've got the script written for the full phone review, because I've spent a couple weeks with it now. I think it's time to share my thoughts, but I haven't been able to wrap up the camera review, if only for a handful, a very small collection of test shots that I rely on for producing my camera reviews. Things like, red flowers in direct sun. We haven't had any direct sun for the last week except for Sunday. I got 1 hour on Sunday where the clouds parted and the haze lifted, and I was running around like a maniac shooting tons and tons and tons of stuff on the G7 so that we can finish up that camera review. And it's hilarious too. So right now on my G7 camera samples folder, I think I'm somewhere around 36 gig of photo and video samples. 36 gig. And I still have to do a couple just little short indoor shots and then some video of the phone, like actually taking pictures of the phone and the cameras and the app and the interface and all that stuff. And I should be able to wrap up that G7 camera review. But the G7 introduced something that really it's okay. So here's part of the process. Let me just jump into this before we get into news and topics. We'll extend housekeeping just a little bit longer. Whenever I do a camera review, every single setup that you see is captured in photo and video, and then with extra features. So if I'm taking a picture of a rose and I want samples that I can use throughout the entire review to showcase what the camera is doing for this one flower shot, I take a burst of photos in auto. If I've got good manual modes, I'll take a burst of photos in manual, usually like between 2 and 4 photos at each place, refocusing with each one. I really want to see what is the phone doing with the autofocus. I really want to get a feel for how the phone responds to things, distance from the main camera sensor. And then I'll also take a burst of photos in HDR. If there are other features like a bokeh mode or a background blur mode, I'll spend a couple of those setups also getting photos in that too. Then I'll go through and hit video. So then I'll take a 20 to 30 second run of video standing in the exact same place. And then I'll also do other fun features too. So for the G7, that means HDR video. So we don't have Cinelog like we do on the V30. So instead, I'll do a run with HDR video in that same setup. And again, that's another 20 to 30 seconds. So that means for one flower shot, I'm there for like 1, 2, 3, 4, regular photos, 1, 2, 3, 4, manual mode and raw photos, 1, 2, 3, 4, HDR photos. Let's hold in place for 30 seconds while I get some UHD video. Then let's hold in place for another 30 seconds while I get some fun mode video. And then for the G7, because it's not a telephoto sensor and it's not a matched sensor like Huawei phones, they have dual camera sensors, but they're matched. For the G7, I get to do that entire process all over again on the ultra-wide camera. So it's ridiculous. Like every single setup that I'm trying to take photos of is about a 5 to 8 minute commitment between all of the things. And then I also I want to reference the photos, make sure I got what I actually needed from that shot. So it's nuts. I mean, I've got to start stepping up to 128 gigabyte memory cards for the phones that even still, allow us to use them. If I had a phone that was 128, but it was built-in storage and didn't give me memory card access, I'm getting close to really putting a huge dent in that storage for a camera review, along with installing all of my apps and services and games and all the stuff that I need to do to test the phone. This is what's getting kind of crazy and why I'm even crankier about devices that don't have good video compression. I maxed out a 32 gig memory card, man. This is nuts. So, moving right along. Sorry, that was a really long-winded way to get to the housekeeping on this is this week I'm going to be working on finishing up the G7 review, the G7 camera review. The camera review will be a Patreon exclusive, SomeGadgetGuy.com/Patreon. I did already have someone rip the LG G7 audio review, so that was posted up on Reddit this morning. And I really want to thank the moderators over at Android. The moderators at Android, would always shut down any of my own videos that I posted myself. They have a very strict guideline, very strict policies about self-promotion, and so my videos never get posted to Reddit. No one ever posts my stuff to Android. I just don't exist there. So of course, one of the only videos to get posted on Android is my LG G7 Patreon perk audio review, which is a private video. So I want to thank the Reddit Android moderators, because they did pull that post as soon as I sent them a mod mail. It also got posted over to our headphones and our audio file, and those mods haven't gotten back to me. So I ended up just having to pull the video anyway. But if you were on the Patreon, the video's already been re-uploaded and restored. And moving forward, I almost want to put out a bounty. Anyone who finds one of my Patreon videos being posted publicly, I need to find a fun perk, like a Steam gift card or something like that, or maybe even just an Amazon bounty that I can send to people who give me the heads up that my stuff's going public like that. From Fat Produce, let's post non-private videos to Reddit, friends. This is the thing that's hilarious. So I've gotten a lot of pushback on putting my audio and video deep dive reviews on Patreon. Excuse me, I do have a little biology going on just because of the shifts in weather. I have taken a ridiculous antihistamine, a decongestant. So hopefully it kicks in during the broadcast on the show. I've had a lot of people give me some pushback on that, and I can appreciate some of the frustrations. But these are also people who don't support the channel, don't support my production. I don't feel too bad about restricting a few of my videos, because most of the audience is super passive anyway. Like, if people aren't even willing to try and give me a share on a platform like Reddit, then why should I be bothered if they can't see one of my videos on Patreon? Whereas I already have a great collection of people that are already supporting production on Patreon. I think I've got 77 patrons. Let's go through the economy here. Like, for people that don't understand what the gig looks like on YouTube right now. So when I had around 20 to 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, I was able to make rent on my YouTube videos. Now, a majority of your views come from search, so it kind of doesn't matter to a degree. I mean, once you start getting into like 10 million subscribers, millions of subscribers, that's a little bit different, and YouTube then promotes you better. YouTube will not promote anyone who's not already popular. They're very much like a Los Angeles talent agent. But with around 20 to 30,000 subscribers, I could make rent. I couldn't buy anything else. I mean, the entire YouTube check would go to paying off rent. Now that my subscription base is over 60,000 subscribers, my views have never been higher. My watch time has never been higher. And since leaving Pocket now, I've finally built my female viewership back up to where it used to be. I'm somewhere around 20% female, which is huge for a tech channel. We would struggle to hit 5% female viewership on Pocket now. My own personal channel, I seem to be doing pretty good with the ladies, if you know what I mean. I apologize for that. That was terrible. But my monetization has never been lower, and now I'm making a couple $100 a month. With 77 subscribers on Patreon, I am $20 a month away from matching what I make with hundreds of thousands of views. 500,000 views this month. I'm $20 away from matching YouTube. If I'm going to continue supporting a community, I do not care if I am imaginary internet points popular on YouTube. I don't care about YouTube's platform. I care about reaching people who want to have a conversation, who are interested in technology, who are positive about technology, because I get really cranky about technology and I need someone to counterbalance me. We've got a lot of cranky news stories to get through this week. And I want to be able to have this content pay for its own production. Right now, it's not. Right now, my investment in cameras and lighting and editing hardware and production hardware and software and everything that it takes to produce a decent video, I'm way lopsided. So right now, I'm seeing people who are interested in at least supporting me for $1 a month, and that's the audience that I really want to support because they're the ones who are also supporting me, and I feel like we're all in this together. So yeah, I'm kind of happy with the direction that this is heading. I mean, like, I'm still trying to figure out what makes for a good Patreon experience, and obviously I haven't figured it out, and I'm hoping that more people will join that conversation, but we'll see where we end up. But right now, the numbers on YouTube are not encouraging, and it's not something I really want to spend a Herculean amount of energy trying to unravel just so that I can be a little bit more popular on YouTube and still not make any more money. I know that sounds terrible and crass and like, oh, just in it for the money. But this is a lot of work, and it's a lot of hard work. And, like, look at what I'm going through for a camera review. It takes me about a week just to collect all the samples and analyze the photo content so I can put together a 20-minute video. Well, it'll probably be closer to like 15 minutes. But, I did a 19-minute commentary on the LG G7 audio. Like, that's not easy. That takes a little bit of time. So, let's see. I've got a ton of comments coming in here from Sherrill. Would you consider Vimeo as your backup content backup? We don't know what YouTube is going to do in the future. This has become an issue that I'm actually talking about with my patrons is if you have an unlisted video on YouTube, they will not stream it in 4K. So my camera reviews might be affected by that. I think I'm still going to be producing and rendering and doing the highest quality, as close to the original camera quality as I can, but it might only stream in HD. So we'll see. I haven't found a good solution. I think Patreon's obviously not interested in creating their own video backbone service, because that would be very expensive to host. They're already doing their own audio, and eventually that's where, once we unlock that perk, the ad-free version of this podcast, the audio podcast, is going to go to that Patreon. There's a special RSS feed just for patrons that that they can get an ad-free version of this podcast. And especially with, I know I've been teasing this for the last couple of weeks, scheduling issues and some major trade shows coming up this month, but I will be doing more interviews on this podcast channel too. So, excuse me. Again, apologies for some of the biology. Like I said, I hope this decongestant starts kicking in now. It would be nice if we had some new kind of video platform. I don't think Vimeo is going to be the solution, though. They're more about setting up a store where people can download the content that they buy. So you can upload a 4K video, but you can only give links to download it. They don't stream in 4K. And then also for like a free version of Vimeo, even for the paid versions of Vimeo, it's a little bit more like SoundCloud. You really look up the pricing structure on Vimeo, it is not conducive to the quality of videos that I produce. So unfortunately for now, that means I'm kind of stuck using YouTube's bandwidth. But I'm kind of fine doing that. They can pay to host my videos. They're not paying me with ad revenue. So I'll just piggyback. It's an ugly situation, and I think it's going to continue to get worse. And then I'll probably have to, I think at some point I'll probably have to look into some sort of self-hosting solution, which is going to be crazy expensive. So we'll have to see what happens there. From Cheryl, also, what is the tee you are wearing? This t-shirt is The Last Starfighter. This is from Last Exit to Nowhere. They are far and away my absolute favorite t-shirt, novelty movie t-shirt company. So all of their shirts are from films, but almost all of their shirts are just the business logos from the films. So you don't get a Shaun of the Dead shirt. You know, it's got like Simon Pegg on it with his cricket bat. Shaun of the Dead, whoa, fried gold. Because I hate having t-shirts that make me look like a walking billboard. But they have a t-shirt of just the logo from the Winchester, the pub that they end up in. So that kind of stuff I think is crazy smart. You don't get a 2001 Space Odyssey t-shirt because who would wear that? Instead, you get the actual logo from the company that built HAL 9000. Awesome stuff. I highly recommend checking out Last Exit to Nowhere. Again, I've found so many like walking around out in public, especially at like theme parks and stuff, single serving friendships from people going, "Hey, wait a minute, isn't that from fill in the movie title?" I got a RoboCop shirt. I've got the Nakatomi Tower from Die Hard. You know, just the logo from Nakatomi. Awesome. I've got a ball cap with the Wayland Yutani logo from Alien. I pick up about a shirt a month from those guys, and it's great. I love it. So, let's see. Let's get into some news. And I'm sorry, like I did see a whole ton of chatter here, especially on the YouTube. I saw a few people joining the conversation on on Periscope. So thanks for jumping in to catch the show there too. But I'm gonna get into some headlines here, just because otherwise this is gonna be a 3-hour podcast instead of a 2-hour podcast, where I really hoped the show would only ever end up being around 90 minutes. So, annoying situation the first. Andy Rubin puts Essential up for sale, cancels next phone. This is something we've been talking about. We talked about it on the Pocket Now podcast, talked about it on the Bored at Work podcast. I want to revisit this just over the weekend. Had a little time, chilled out, thought about it some more. The more I think about it, the more angry I get. The more frustrated I get with Andy Rubin and the way that he pitched Essential to Android fans. I'm really frustrated about this because it makes my job as a reviewer more difficult. We have these conversations in our tech community about how we have these conversations in the tech community about how the landscape's getting kind of stale. We want to see innovation. We want to see companies taking risks. And then we end up in situations where the echo chamber basically just supports Samsung and Apple as the foregone conclusion that they'll be the winners of the year. And then there's only room for maybe 2 other companies that get good SEO on YouTube. And right now that the momentum seems to be behind the Pixel and the OnePlus. So those are your winners. That's what you get to choose from. Anything else is a thumbs down, not worth it for the money. What sets it apart from the competition? I won't answer that question, even though there are answers, and we don't have the bandwidth for anything else. Everything else is a loser. So when a company like Essential pops up with someone like Andy Rubin, if anyone had the cred to convince us to go with him on this experiment, this man had the credibility, the sort of father of Android before Google turned it into what we know today. If anyone had the credibility for us to try an experiment on some other company, it was Andy Rubin. And he went out there on different platforms and different interviews, sitting on the Recode stage with Walt Mossberg. I have my issues with Recode too. Not with Walt Mossberg, but with Recode post Walt Mossberg. And he's sitting there saying all the right things. We know we're going to be a niche player. We want to build this organically. We won't be able to be an overnight success. So what we want to do is grow this over successive years and create something exciting and really get people into this new paradigm. He was having all these interviews talking about how what he created, he didn't like what it had become and he wanted to change things up. And then his first smartphone wasn't an overnight instant success, rivaling the competition, so he took his ball and went home. Now, every single time this happens, when it happens with Microsoft and Windows Phone, when it happens to another major manufacturer trying something different, an LG with a Flex, an HTC with a U Ultra, it makes it so much more difficult to recommend something new. Now, it's going to be even that one step harder for a new player to enter into this ecosystem and not expect 3 to 4 years of total failure in the marketplace to build up their reputation. Who's going to recommend a new product now when even Andy Rubin couldn't make his company work after promising us that he wasn't looking to be an overnight success, a 1-year success? This is terrible. We're now, again, stuck in a reinforcing echo chamber loop of, well, I guess you only need to go with popular phones. You should only ever buy a popular phone because a new player, a risky player, I don't know what's going to happen. So now it's up to a company like Red to see if they have the fortitude to stick around in the market so that we get something different. And that's a real bummer. I really don't want this to be as stuck. I really don't want this to feel as stale. But I think it just continues to support that we have reached smartphone as commodity, that we've reached peak smartphone, that phones don't really get better from here. They just kind of get different. And then we're all ready for another company to do something actually challenging to this ecosystem. The metaphor of glowing rectangle, what touch square get app, I think we're ready to move on. I think these little toe dips in voice assistants and different gestures. Ooh, instead of pushing a home button, you slide to go home. That doesn't change anything except the momentary muscle confusion of having to relearn a very basic action for the sake of relearning a very basic action. It doesn't do anything different for the overall experience. It doesn't fix or address any of the issues. Makes the phone more difficult to use in some situations, like if you have to drive with your car ever. And then we're kind of just still stuck in the exact same paradigm of app stores, dichotomy of major players, and a lack of actual substantive progress on improving these things. Very little evolution happening right now. So that's where we're kind of stuck. And I want to say thanks for nothing, Andy Rubin. You've made the problem worse. For all of your boasting and grandstanding about how you were going to be the guy to change the paradigm on this stuff, you've actually reinforced why no one should ever take a risk, why no one should ever go with a new player, and why the smartphone market deserves to stay with the two companies who spend the most on marketing. Kudos. It's not a meritocracy, it's who spends the most on marketing to become the lifestyle brand, Apple and Samsung, so they get the win. And that's where we're going to be stuck. That's it. That's all over, guys. From Katz, I've given up on Samsung. I'm hoping LG gets it together. Love the audio, and the camera is really getting there. I've had a lot of fun shooting with the LG G7. From Aditya, Vivo seems to be doing stuff right. Fingerprint scanner and retractable camera. Again, getting away from notches, cutting into our screen. From Samuel, I think Essential could have worked if he could stay in. It always the reality versus the fantasy of how to launch a phone. It appears to be an uphill battle. My hypothesis is it takes 3 generations of updating products, supporting the products that you've already released, and 3 generations of savvy marketing. So it's not just I was in the market for 3 years, give me the monies. It's I stuck around, I demonstrated to the tech community that we could be in this fight and that we could continue supporting in this fight. And we've reached out to general consumers in traditional marketing venues, TV ads, radio ads, billboard, print. That stuff still matters to show that you're a grown-up brand. If you really want to cross over into major success, it doesn't matter who the company is to wage that war. Microsoft couldn't make things happen with Windows Phone. Why? My hypothesis is that even though they were around for years, they kept interrupting the flow of their product line. They'd put out a new flagship, and then it would be 2 to 3 years before we'd get a new true follow-up to that flagship. Consumers didn't know what to expect. They expect a new iPhone announcement like clockwork. They expect 2 Samsung announcements every year, at least. And they've been doing that for years to reinforce consumers know when to expect these new things. If you're just sort of farting around, no one's going to come to follow your brand. Now, you juxtapose that with the Surface team, where we got the Surface Pro and everyone panned it. I mean, go back and watch those Surface videos. Just as the Surface 2 was starting to get rumored and to start popping up, a lot of tech bloggers went back and re-looked at that first Surface, and you know what? It was better than we thought it was. Give us the Surface 2. Give us the Surface 2. Surface Pro 2 comes out, gets some slightly more positive reviews. We see stupid commercials from Microsoft with people dancing with keyboard blades. And then the Surface Pro 3 shows up and consumers start taking it seriously. From Surface Pro 3 on, Microsoft has a legitimate brand that consumers consider a premium product, competes with the MacBook, and it took 3 years, 3 generations of losing in the market before that happened. That's what Andy Rubin sold us, and that's what he totally bailed on. So now he's lost all credibility with me. I'm not going to go with him on any future experiments until I see that he's willing to stick around for more than a year. And that's the game. All right, let me take a little sip of coffee here. From Sherrill, the 3-generation idea may work for some. However, live chat's going too fast. However, the tech community and the modern consumer in general have lower attention spans these days when we have the need it yesterday generation around. So Sherrill, this is actually where I want to give consumers some credit. The thing about marketing and staying power in this 3-generation concept is because we do have a pretty short attention span for this stuff, it's that constant presence in the ecosystem over those 3 generations, showing progress that leads consumers to search out more information on things that they're just getting a handle on. And it seems to take about 3 generations of product before consumers are trying to figure out what that thing is. It's around Surface Pro 3 that consumers started considering the Surface to be a better competitor to the MacBook. And once consumers started seeking that out, that's when the tone really changed for reviewers. If a reviewer is nervous about general audiences coming to their videos and then having a negative interaction with those videos, that really colors the tone of the discussion. You can look at several reviewers who will remain nameless, but I think those of you who have watched my videos in the past know who I'm talking about. it's way more difficult for them to really heavily criticize a Samsung because so much of their viewership comes from Samsung. It's really difficult for them to outright harshly criticize an iPhone because so much viewership comes from iPhone. If you look at SEO, Samsung, Galaxy, and iPhone rank really high. So if you want your videos to do well, you want your YouTube points, and with those YouTube points, especially if you've got a ton of subscribers, comes better monetization, then you tend to back off the hard criticisms of those two companies, but it's really easy to punch down on LG, HTC, other companies. I'm sorry, BlackBerry. It's really easy to go, oh, well, not good enough, better luck next year. And that makes you seem like you can dole out the tough criticisms, but you're not judging those phones on the same playing field. When consumers are responsible for some of that traffic, finding these videos, and then some of them actually weighing in the comments, that's when you see the tone shift. That's exactly what happened when we started looking at the Surface. It was trendy and easy and popular with tech enthusiasts to poop all over Windows 8. Windows 8 was a bad transition, but it wasn't a non-functional OS. It had some good ideas in there, and it was actually pretty decent at conveyance for the new scheme for the user, for the UI. I think Microsoft picked the wrong fight in trying to make everything a tablet, especially non-touchscreen devices. There was a whole video about Windows 8, like, oh, there's no conveyance. And you're like, except for when I move the mouse around and it tells me I can do things, because that's conveyance. When you look at that tone, it's once consumers started getting into the conversation that tech reviewers, led by the nose for their video views and their monetization, changed their tune. And that's where we're stuck right now. So I think actually I want to give consumers a lot of credit here, because tech enthusiasts tend to not get new things or review things fairly until there's a momentum behind the product already. When the product is popular, then it gets a different kind of analysis and scrutiny. So I think we should all be, those of us in the tech community, the tech enthusiast space, should at least extend an olive branch to our non-techie geeky friends, because part of what they're interested in keeps us in new stuff and new conversations. So, let's get this out of the way here. This is just a quick story. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. FBI to America. Reboot your routers right now. This is coming from Popular Mechanics. The FBI has issued a dire warning to everyone who has a router in their home. So everybody. The Internet Crime Complaint Center sent a rare public service announcement declaring foreign cyber actors have compromised hundreds of thousands of home and office routers and other networked devices worldwide. So we should probably get on that. This is going to become a growing conversation that I hope you can have with your family and friends too. Smart home, Internet of Things, connected devices, everything is a computer. We need to stop acting like your thermostat is a thermostat. It's a computer. It's a web-connected computing device. It just has a very limited range of use. So when we're starting to deal with this stuff, changing passwords, updating firmwares, and then, the things that connect all of our devices to our home network, the router itself is becoming an increasingly important backbone for the whole ecosystem, your personal area network of gadgets and services. So this is going to be the new thing. Like back when 802.11b was hot and fresh, I think I went one router, like never even checking to see if it had a firmware update over 3 or 4 years, and MBD. Even if it was compromised, who would really come after my data? Now I've got dozens and dozens of computers in my house, connected to cameras, connected to very sensitive electronics, a lot of personal information. My entire life is being lived here. So now this is increasingly important that we actually fix this stuff. So hopefully the router manufacturers actually get some patches and some firmware out too. Of course, the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist in me is wondering, like, well, maybe the FBI infected a bunch of our routers and now they need us to reboot those routers so that infected software can be activated. But I don't want to put that out there. I mean, I just put it out there. I don't really want to put that out there because I like at some point I want to have some sense of what reality really is and how we can protect people's information. So we'll see how all that goes. Let me get this out of the way next too. Sorry, this is just a week full of frustrating news. This is from Cats in the YouTube chat. I don't like ISP issued routers. Almost all DSL providers in North America use Smart RG. It's a nice big target. Yeah, I mean, again, that's the thing too. I have a cable modem router all in one, and it's terrible. So I just have it connected to my Eero. And my Eero is the main point of interface for all of our gadgets. And then the Eero has one additional Ethernet port. So that is connected to a really hardcore Linksys, which I'm using for all of the rest of the cabled connections. No other Wi-Fi. All the other cabled connections that I need from my desktop, my printer, and I'm actually running a cable down to the TV just because because I can. I would highly recommend, even for your parents and stuff. One, mesh is really cool. So my folks are having to change their cable providers. I'm going to see if I can get them off of the cable company router and see if I can't get them into something like mesh, just because it's easier to set up. It's way better coverage than a single router solution. I just think it's been a nice fit. So we'll see how we can shift that up there too. But yeah, getting away from those, because especially I'm sorry, that was a really long walk to get to the point, which is because these companies because these companies rent out the same hardware to hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of subscribers. If you can find one exploit, then you've found a way to exploit thousands and thousands and thousands of households. So I think there's a huge argument to be made for separating yourself from the main glut of hardware that your cable company uses. First of all, it's usually terrible. So let's just get that out of the way right now. You can step up to a really nice gaming router. A ton of companies making some really hardcore, almost business grade networking solutions. And I know it's an extra cost and money's tight these days, but it's something that also better protects you from these types of exploits when law enforcement comes out and says, hey, a bunch of routers have been compromised. You have the ability to disconnect if you have a router that was affected, or you can double down on your security. You can change up your security. You have more control over that experience, and you have better tools to do it. While also you'll probably just get better throughput and better bandwidth because, again, cable companies, they're not looking to give you the best wireless solution or the best Ethernet solution. They're giving you whatever they can, mass buy on the cheap and then have you pay out the nose for it. So again, might be worth considering. All right. Another quick bit of bummer news here. This one confirmed via tweet. Here we go. This is coming from Team YouTube, at Team YouTube. So a tweet from JPM_507 from Jonathan. Why aren't the videos in my subscription feed in chronological order anymore? That was in all caps. YouTube replies, just to clarify, we are currently experimenting with how to show content in the subs feed. We find that some viewers are able to more easily find the videos they want to watch when we order the subs feed in a personalized order versus always showing most recent videos first. As if I needed another reason to be frustrated with YouTube. They are further actively walking away from chronological view, where most of the channels I interact with, I want to see ordered content, how they produced it, how they delivered it, how they distributed it. Oh no, like Facebook, YouTube seems to think that they know better for keeping your eyes on YouTube. Again, this is not a benefit for the consumer being able to more easily find the content they want. This is not a benefit for YouTube producers because we already have a gamed two-stage subscription process. I ask you to subscribe to my channel and smash that bell icon, and you probably still won't get good notifications for when I'm putting out content. So YouTube is already manipulating all of that. This is ridiculous. So instead, what we're looking at is them trying to manipulate the feed, just like we know Facebook does, to try and keep people going down deep dives. Autoplay is on by default when you sign into YouTube on a new device. And this is again, it's going to be a step towards improving the situation for content which is already popular at the expense of smaller producers who are not being promoted on YouTube like they used to be. This is not about organic search. This is not about a benefit to the consumer. This is not about honoring what the consumer says they wanted. If you subscribe to my channel, then you're saying you want to see my videos, but that's not how YouTube is interpreting that. YouTube is interpreting that as, well, you kind of want to throw all of these videos into one bucket, and then we'll tell you what you want to watch. So again, I'm a grown-up, and I know what I've subscribed to, and I know the producers that I want to interact with, and they're almost never suggested. I go to my YouTube homepage, that's where you should try and feed me new content that I hadn't considered before, and instead it's full of channels that I've already told YouTube on multiple occasions that I am not interested in watching. I have nothing against the guy. I think he's a great producer. I think he's got a ton of hustle, but I am not interested in Phil DeFranco. That is not my kind of conversation. That's not how I want to consume news, and I'm not really interested in channels that also delve into a whole bunch of YouTube drama. I don't care about the platform enough to see who has beef with who. This isn't Biggie versus Tupac. You know, like, we've moved on. But he's almost always a regular appearance. I watch a lot of political content, but I'm not interested in the Rubin Report. He just doesn't do it for me. I kind of already know what he's going to say about the regressive left and politics and why he's no longer a liberal and stuff. So I got over it. I know his Vic. But again, because I've watched other videos about political stuff, he's regularly promoted to me, even though I go to YouTube and I click, I'm not interested in the channel. I've already seen these videos. Please stop suggesting them. And that doesn't seem to matter at all. So again, this is why I'm not interested in trying to be the most popular or most successful on YouTube. I'm not interested in YouTube success. I just want to be a successful producer. Whatever tools I have at my disposal, I want to maximize those tools, build a community. I love building little communities. Like from my movie review show 10 years ago to today, talking about gadgets and electronics, I like building up a little base of people who are also like-minded and like talking about this stuff, and then being like a little king of a niche. Like my camera and audio reviews kind of make me feel like I'm a little king of being able to talk about this stuff with some knowledge or some experience or some authority. And so that's where I'm going to go. It's why the points on YouTube don't matter to me, and why I don't really care to invest more time, more effort, more energy, more money in trying to convince YouTube that I'm worth promoting or worth working with. They've drawn numerous lines in the sand to say, you don't matter. You're a smaller content producer. You're not important. So I have no problems using their servers. Their servers can continue to host my content for free while I figure out what I'm going to do with some other solution. All right. I'm going to take another sip of coffee here. From Renato Laporte. Yeah, replying to Fat Produce. This too. I know the struggle. I either get something I've watched already or something I'm definitely not interested in. My favorite thing on YouTube so far has been, I'll go to a channel like Red Letter Media. I like those guys. I think they're funny. I think their reviews technically aren't fair use because of the way that they use content in their reviews, but I digress. But I'll go and I'll watch one of their reviews, and then the second I go back to my YouTube homepage, the review I just watched is one of the main recommendations right at the top of the page. I'm like, YouTube, I'm not hiding any of this information. Google, you have every single piece of information on me. I remember when I was in a computer programming class, it should be a pretty if-then-else statement. If Juan has watched video then don't immediately suggest the exact video he just watched, end, run program. Like, this shouldn't be this difficult. This shouldn't be this hard. Okay, moving right along. I want to get into some net neutrality stuff. First, a little bit of a bummer, then two things which are a little bit more positive for the international community, and hopefully something us Americans can learn from. This first up is coming from TechCrunch. Representatives rip FCC Chairman Pai's lack of candor and double down on net neutrality questions. 13 members of Congress have written to FCC Chairman Ajit Pai, criticizing his, quote, repeated evasive responses to our inquiries and, quote, outright refusal to respond to some of the members of the committee. End quote. Unsatisfied with the answers or evasions he has offered to date, they reiterate questions related to net neutrality and other issues that they've sent over the past months. So this is a sort of an ongoing story. The FCC repeal made it through the Senate. We did get the votes we needed for the Senate to try and halt the repeal of Title II regulation for net neutrality. Now it goes to the House. I'm pretty sure, if I've got this process down, if I understand what's happening, that on June 11th, net neutrality is going to be repealed. I don't think that moves. So even though there's this bureaucratic legislative action that's being performed, I think that still goes down. But at the same time, we are looking at numerous potential corruption issues that are happening in the FCC, not only from Chairman Pai's relationships outside, because, you know, he was a former Verizon counsel and he still seems to be pretty close with his former employers and the rest of the telecommunications lobbying. I would say that there's evidence to suggest that there's a regulatory capture action happening here, where the very industries that are supposed to be regulated by this agency are in charge of how this agency works, or have undue influence, I should say, over how the FCC should operate. So we see that. We see those investigations. There's also the whole issue with Sinclair Broadcasting, where the FCC struck down a decades-old rule about how many outlets and how much influence one company could have over a certain area or region, buying up tons of television stations. We played that one video of every single local news station that's repeating the exact same script in this 1984 Orwellian nightmare of doublethink and doublespeak. I might link to that again, just because it's terrifying to see all of these different local news broadcasters reading off the same script about how media can't be trusted unless it's a Sinclair news station. So what we've got here is a whole slew of issues surrounding something like the internet, and now we've got, well, at least we have some members of Congress. 13 members of Congress, that's not a lot. But we all kind of know how this game is going to go. We all kind of know how this game is going to be played. We've got a few elected officials who want to publicly wag their finger at someone, make it look like they're doing something, and then nothing's really going to change. You know, we saw Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress to talk about Facebook problems, and we haven't seen any significant change in policy or in data protection. It took Europe. I mean, all of those emails that you're getting about, we're revising our privacy policy, we're revising our licensing agreement, we're revising our terms of service, that came from Europe. And this is actually what leads me into the next two stories about net neutrality. Is we shouldn't expect any change, any substance from this conversation, because I really doubt our elected officials have a good finger on the pulse of technology. But we are seeing progress in other places. I'm going to maximize this right here. So this is from the website betakit.com, betakit.com. Canada's House of Commons adopts motion to formally enshrine net neutrality into law. Hey, Canada, look at that. All right. Canada's House of Commons yesterday adopted a private member's motion that argued in support of recognizing existing and future net neutrality protections. Of Canada's 338 federal MPs, 277 voted in favor of adopting Liberal MP for Oakville John Oliver's private members motion M-168. There were no votes against adopting the bill, but due to the absence of votes from the remaining 61 members of the House, the vote wasn't technically passed unanimously. Holy cow. Holy crap, that's great. Canada, good job. You need to fix some of your problems with your cell phone industry, but this is a huge step in the right direction for protecting consumer rights, for consumer protections. 277 members out of 338, no votes. Holy cow. That's awesome. So kudos, Canada. Good step in the right direction. Our neighbors to the north actually leading the way on what would be a positive change for consumers and the internet, and that makes me crazy happy. From Katz, yes, but Bell Canada is trying to get the right to block sites they considered to be, P-rate. I don't know what P-rate is, but it's not over. This isn't ever over. There should be an escalating arms race between industry, corporations, government, and citizens. But what we should see is some base level, bare minimum regulation that consumers can tap into when actual wrong has occurred. If there's nothing there, we deregulate from the top down. That means corporations can do whatever they want without oversight. Well, that's not good for competition. That's not good for a free market. That's not good for consumers. So we should have some base level, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that kind of regulation. Title II has served us really well in the United States with every other industry that's applicable to Title II, like telephones. If you like being on Verizon or T-Mobile or Sprint or U.S. Cellular or any other competitor, and maybe you don't want to do business with AT&T, the only reason you have that is because of divestiture, and the only reason you had divestiture was because of having a backbone of Title II regulation over something that is as crucial to life as a telephone. Well, I believe the internet is just as crucial, and it should be regulated and protected with the exact same style of light touch consumer protections. So, cats, pirating. Oh, so block sites they consider to be pirate sites. Okay. So then we have to have some harder conversations about how to police information services. And that's going to be a moving target too. I just think if we can classify the internet as a telecommunications service, which deserves the same kind of protections as the telephone for how you get onto the internet, then we can have different conversations about what to do with pirating content, file sharing, distribution, copyright, licensing, trademarks, all of that. But we shouldn't allow the companies who get us onto the internet to have full say over what services you can and can't use, what you pay for different services to utilize bandwidth, and then to compete directly against those services. So if Comcast has their own streaming service, well, they can prioritize that over Netflix, and then you can just pay more for Netflix and then still get throttled. Because that's exactly what's happened before Title II. Remember, there were the interconnect fees that Netflix had to pay. They paid them. They paid this extortionary interconnect fee, even though they were already paying for a ton of bandwidth for Comcast and Verizon, and then they still got throttled. So there was no incentive for the cable companies to play ball. They got everything they wanted, paid twice on every single interaction from the consumer and from the distributor, got even more money for the interconnect, so from going from node to node on every single Netflix box, refused to play with Netflix when Netflix was going to pay to install hardware to lessen the load on ISPs, and then still throttled those streaming companies, Netflix and YouTube specifically. I remember those articles being also about YouTube. All of this is rigged. All of this is gamed. So if we don't even have the minimum where we could go to a woefully underfunded, understaffed government agency and say, hey, this is wrong, and they can eventually get around to investigating it, then we're proper screwed. So Canada, excellent step in the right direction. My hat's off to you. And I love that you have a legislative body that recognized the importance of this for their own political careers. Because here in the United States, unfortunately, we haven't fully realized that we can apparently do something about elected officials that don't have our best interests in mind. And that leads me to one more positive story And this is coming out of the UK. Hold on, let me go back to the screen share here. This is from Wired, wired.co.uk. Your ISP finally has to stop lying to you about broadband speeds. New rules about broadband advertising will usher in a depressing new era of honesty about the UK's cripplingly out-of-date internet infrastructure. From today, new advertising rules will force internet service providers to be more upfront about exactly how fast your connection should be. Previously, broadband providers could entice people with tantalizingly fast up to speeds, so long as they were available to at least 10% of customers at any time of day. The new average speed must be available to at least 50% of customers at peak times, i.e. when you're actually at home trying to stream Netflix in 4K or make a Skype call that doesn't drop out every 2 minutes. Hallelujah! Some other countries seeing the light, seeing some sense. This is a huge step in the right direction for consumers. We're trying to play these games with marketing and branding and advertising, but we're trying to convince people that 5G wireless is going to be the way to go. If we don't have fiber lit up across the country, if we don't have backhaul to support these new cell towers, if we don't have a communications infrastructure that actually makes it to the home on cables, on wires, we're not really going to get better stuff. You know, it's like hooking up an amazingly fast gigabit router to a 1 megabit DSL connection. You've got a gigabit router. Isn't that nifty? That's the new fastest tech. But you still can't stream YouTube. Sorry, bye-bye. So all of these initiatives to try and convince us that, wireless is going to save our butts are totally specious. They'll improve in some areas, but they're going to mostly improve in areas that are already well-served by gigabit LTE and pretty fast cable connections to the home. The only thing that's going to move the needle is getting fiber to the home. And if you care about infrastructure here in the United States for things like the electrical grid, if we want a smart grid, the only way we're going to get there is if we have data that the smart grid can use to manage smart devices in our homes. This is what makes me so excited about having technology like Powerwall, like having a home battery or an electric car, so that you could plug your car in, and then when energy's at its peak, your home and the grid could work together to minimize the impact and move energy around. Like maybe there are times like there's a brownout, but you desperately need to keep an appliance running, and you could pull power from your car to make sure that that's working still. You know, like say you've got medication in a fridge and you don't want your fridge to warm up too much. You could do that. You can't do that if we don't have a smart infrastructure capable of moving that around. How do we get there? The fastest way to get there is fiber to home. This is the initiative that landed in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chattanooga got a grant from the Department of Energy to start laying fiber to the home. And the reason why they got that funding is because the DOE wanted to examine how information moved as a potential future backbone for the energy grid. Right now in the United States, if you were to knock out a handful of key nodes in our energy grid, and hackers could probably pull this off without too much effort because we also don't take cybersecurity that seriously here in the United States, you could probably shut down the East Coast for weeks. You could brown out huge population centers for weeks. Here in Southern California, when we start having rolling blackouts this summer because of the energy demand on our grid, San Diego's going to have a tough time if we have another really hot summer, which all climate predictions are pointing towards this being yet again the hottest year on record. If we don't have a way to move information around more readily, we have an energy grid that wasn't built in the 40s, then we would be able to fix this. But we can't do that without fiber to home. So, unfortunately, the fastest way to do this is to get consumers on board. And right now in the United States, they have zero patience for techie, geeky conversations. But in the UK, they're about to see what their money actually gets them. And that's the fastest way to piss people off. We told you had a 100 megabit connection, and that's what you were paying us for. But really, it's more It's more like 20. That's what you really get. And we're not going to play this game anymore of up to 100 megabits for, 10 seconds. If you stand on your left foot under a blue moon, then yeah, that's the speed you'll get. Instead, this is what you're really paying for. And that's the fastest way to move the needle. If we want fiber to home, I pay way more for way less than if we had a community-backed fiber initiative or Google Fiber in my neighborhood. And it pisses me off. And it pisses me off that no one around me seems to be particularly bothered by it, because I can still stream YouTube. Look, it's perfectly fine. And you're like, you have no idea how much better this could all be, how this could be the backbone for the future of healthcare, for being able to speak to doctors and not have to schedule appointments and leave work, or take up extra time, of education, for being able to reinforce what your kids are learning, or maybe you want to take night classes. Everything gets better if we had this bandwidth, and it would be cheaper. After the initial investments through, those costs drop a lot. So I hope the UK sees the light from this too, because this is a huge step towards shining a light on the problem. And once we shine a light on the problem, hopefully consumers actually take action to do something about it. So, speaking of consumers taking action against problems, this next story is one that's also been kind of ongoing for a while now. This is coming out of the Seattle Times, and specifically about Seattle, but I think is something that's a sentiment that's reaching a wider berth right now. Bitcoin backlash as miners suck up electricity, stress power grids in central Washington. Again, from the Seattle Times. I'll have links to all of these stories in the show notes once the show finishes on YouTube. Public hearings for rural electric utilities are rarely sellout events. But the crowd that showed up in Wenatchee 2 weeks ago for a hearing about Bitcoin mining in Chelan County was so large that the utility staff had to open a second room with a video feed for the overflow. I would really highly recommend reading this story once I've got the link posted. I want to go through just a couple numbers here. Right now, in a normal year, demand for electric power in this county grows by 4 megawatts. That's enough for around 2,250 homes. 4 megawatts, 2,200 households. As Bitcoin enthusiasts bid up the price of the currency, eager miners have requested a staggering 210 megawatts for mines that they want to build in the county. That's nearly as much as the county and its 73,000 residents are already using. And that's because power in that state is really cheap. They're using hydroelectric power, natural hydroelectric, and their energy rates are really low. So these computers have to mine these really difficult mathematical problems. That adds to Bitcoin's value. That's how people unlock new Bitcoins or parts of Bitcoins, and everyone sort of distributes that, and somehow that's worth. That demonstrates value for Bitcoin. So there was another one here, right here. The scale of some new requests is mind-boggling. Until recently, the largest mines in Chelan County used 5 megawatts or less. 5 megawatts. A single Bitcoining operation could use up to 5 megawatts. 4 megawatts is 2,200 homes. So, in the past 6 months, by contrast, miners have requested loads of 50 megawatts, and in several cases, 100 megawatts. By comparison, a fruit warehouse uses around 2.5 megawatts of power over the same period of time. We got to get more solar, guys. We got to get more wind. Again, this is a really difficult situation to unravel, because we want to have laws that protect fair and even pricing. Someone should be able to go and buy this stuff and not have too many barriers to their businesses having access to energy, to water, to other basic concerns and needs. But at the same time, energy is finite. Bandwidth is finite. If there are some concerns, we need to be able to address them as a community, as consumers, and find something that's fair to work out. But if any company can just do business in any way that they want and go and set up shop in this county and then start browning out that grid, then you've got some major problems, whether or not you even have the infrastructure to support that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I think this is going to be a really difficult situation for the United States to work out because of the way that we tend to protect businesses and corporations. But I think it also points to, and I've said this before, and I apologize for repeating myself here, I think this also points to the fact that I don't think currency is the killer app for blockchain. So we use these blockchain technologies to verify a record of purchases and transfers, and it could be really great for money orders. But right now, Bitcoin by itself is using up more power per year than the country of Ireland. So that's not really sustainable, especially if we're going to have any competing currencies. So we need to have better solutions. And I know like Ethereum started shifting up the way that they valued and they paid out for mining and for blockchaining and how they interact with different ASICs. And I know that people are working on this situation, but the current implementation of blockchain technologies today, to me, does not seem like a sustainable resource for how much we have to pay for power to power a ledger for a currency. But if we wanted to use blockchain for other ways of distributing parts of the internet, distributing content, decentralizing and protecting some pieces of content, that to me seems like if we were to combine blockchain with peer-to-peer in a smart way, that it wouldn't necessarily need to be as severe an energy demand. We could build specialized hardware to help fulfill that in sort of not server central, but at least, you know, decentralized but server grade hardware. And then that could be a future that a more meaningful future for blockchain tech. And of course, I knew Fat Produce was going to jump into the live chat. HTC is the killer product for blockchain. HTC and a couple of other smartphone manufacturers are looking at blockchain phones. I don't know that HTC will really move the needle on it, but when you look at like some of the gags in, what was it, season 3 of Silicon Valley, where they started talking about making a decentralized internet, like a future internet that didn't have the same kind of server setup, and everyone just sort of hosted a small piece of the internet on their own computing devices with better encryption and better compression. That actually could be a future, so long as the energy it takes to drive that doesn't eclipse small nations. Right now, our current implementation of Bitcoin would suggest to me that the power demand would be exponential for a service that wouldn't be better. So that's not sustainable. That's impossible. But I do think it's interesting to see that Seattle is now currently Seattle and Washington State is currently putting a halt on future Bitcoin mining operations, and a number of smaller communities around the United States have already done that. I think a number of other countries have already started looking at how to minimize the impact on this. And again, I haven't seen where Bitcoin has managed to make that transition into a proper currency, something that you can trust the value of it beyond it being speculative, other than just it's the first successful proof of concept of blockchain tech. But that to me doesn't inherently hold value beyond just the speculation of trying to hold value in an idea or a concept. And I think we'll have better versions of that concept in the future. So I'm not super positive on Bitcoin as an investment. Take that to the bank. You should not be following me for investment advice. Don't do that. Okay. Moving on to a company that has been a safer bet for investments. Sorry, I probably should have shifted the topic before I went to screen share. So this is from The Verge, and I have another story following it right up. Internal documents reveal Apple knew the iPhone 6 was more likely to bend than previous models. So internal documents point to Apple being aware of bendgate and also touch disease. There was a problem with iPhone 6 screens and how they interacted with gestures and touches and swipes and stuff like that. And At the same time, this is also going down. This didn't get very much traction at all last week. This is from patentlyapple.com. Apple hit with a 5-count class action for the MacBook Pro's defective keyboard, the second lawsuit on this issue this month. Ongoing conversations about consumer electronics. I'm a reviewer, and I don't necessarily care so much about being the most popular reviewer on the planet. This is where I reach out to you, my family and friends in the tech community, to have these conversations with your family and friends about trying to find the best gadget for them. We're not trying to reinforce what's the most popular. We're not trying to score SEO points on videos and reviews and tweets and Facebook posts, getting the most thumbs ups that we can. I am still of a mind where for numerous members of my family, I will still be recommending Apple products. I do not enjoy Apple products. I do not use Apple products in any meaningful way. And the only phone, I always have it within arm's reach, the only phone that I do like to test out Apple stuff on is the iPhone SE. This to me is still the best translation of iOS to hardware that we've ever seen because iOS was designed originally to be used on hardware like this. Call me old-fashioned. But as we are going through the process of trying to find these recommendations, what's the best fit gadget? Don't just recommend someone get a Galaxy S9 Plus because it's the popular phone. Maybe they don't need those features. Maybe they don't want that price tag, but they're being told, well, that's the bestest phone, and you need the bestest phone, so that's the phone you should get. My wife is currently using a Moto G5. My sister's currently using a Moto G4. My mom is about to get rid of her Galaxy S5. And we're having these sort of tentative conversations about where to point her for a future gadget. My dad was a Samsung user. His newest phone is a Pixel. It was more about let's really go down. What are the pros and cons? And the BlackBerry almost won for my dad. It was a tough battle going back and forth between the Pixel 2, the smaller Pixel 2, and the BlackBerry. And actually, the BlackBerry lost just because it was a little bit bigger and he wanted a really tiny phone. But he didn't like the Xperia Compact, but he eventually moved over and got the Pixel. He was really not thrilled with the headphone jack, though, so that was tough. Again, some of these things are just taken out of our control anyway. I can't say vote with your wallet if you don't like the notch, because by next year you won't be able to buy a phone, apparently, that doesn't have a notch. So this is where we come back to the conversation on Apple. Apple does not deserve to have the parroting reputation where we just lockstep, it just works. It's a premium product. It's the best. Apple is a manufacturer like any other. They are not made of any special unicorn poop that they get to deserve the reputation that they currently have. Every single one of their products has issues, just like every single manufacturer. They are not special. They are not different. They are not thinking different, and their marketing doesn't always, their devices don't always live up to their marketing. They are still a premium manufacturer. They make high quality equipment, but they are not free of defects, of problems, and we can point to a consistent track record of Apple not always living up to their manufacturing obligations. When there are problems with Apple products, Apple tends to sit on those problems longer, and it usually requires some kind of class action lawsuit before Apple really owns up to a mistake. It takes some kind of legal attention being shined on Apple before they'll do the right thing. They are not a magnanimous company. They are not your friend. They are not altruistic. They are a capitalist corporation who the main reason for their existence is to provide value for their shareholders. That is what a corporation does. We do not need to be deferential to a major corporation. And this goes for everybody. This goes for Apple. This goes for Samsung. This goes for Microsoft. This goes for Google. They are not our buddies. But the thing that bothers me about Apple is banking on a reputation built during the Jobs era, which today, especially today, just doesn't seem to hold water like it should. this is where we need to have those conversations. If you have a family member that's super into Apple products, I don't think the job is to, in one generation, just say, no more Apple. Don't buy Apple. They're the worst. Because really, then you confront them with that. They're going to double down on, oh, well, no, you're just being an angry geek, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. And then when you have real tech issues, they're not going to turn to you for help. They're not going to turn to you for your expertise as being a tech enthusiast. But instead, it's worth having that saying, like, you've been on the iPhone. You like the iPhone. I think you should stick with the iPhone. I just need you to know every single major generation of the iPhone has had problems. Every single one. The iPhone 4, antenna gate, fixed on the iPhone 4S. The iPhone 5, massive battery issues that they did not acknowledge until 2 years after the iPhone 5 had been out. Well, after 2 years, more consumers were already flipping over into an iPhone 6. iPhone 6, bend gate, that Apple knew about, that internal documents show. They knew that there was a greater likelihood of damage coming to that product because of the way they redesigned the shell. iPhone 7, we started having other problems too. So then we start looking at MacBooks, and every single primary generation of a MacBook design has had some significant problems, even down to the original unibody. Remember when Apple said it's a unibody MacBook, except for the solder points on the display right near the hinge. So right where the screen is most likely to flex and bend is where it's also most likely to break. Awesome. And we've had several generations of like bad capacitors, and now we've got faulty keyboards on MacBooks. That's not to say don't buy a MacBook. It's to say be honest with your purchase. You're going to spend $3,000. Maybe you'll get good support from an Apple store. Maybe you'll probably get better support from an Apple store than you would if you bought an Acer. But know that it's a piece of electronics built by humans and mass produced. So it's probably going to have some problems. Don't let Apple get away with being special because they spend more on advertising than any other company. That's the game. That's the gig. And so this is from Tech Leathercraft. iOS is still more secure than Android. Definitely recommend it to my less techie friends and family. Not only is iOS more secure, but we can also count on Apple to deliver better updates, or at least more consistent updates. iOS 11 definitely had some teething pains at launch, but Apple pushing out updates directly to phones. Android 8.0 had some issues at launch, but at launch, we only got to 3% of the smartphone market actually getting Oreo. And then since then, very, very few phones are actually getting 8.1. I think the only phone of mine with 8.1 is my Honor View 10. So, again, this is the phone that's most up to date. Not just in terms of security fixes and bug patches, but the actual main newest version build from Google of the operating system. That's this $500 phone. Not the Mate 10 Pro, not my LG V30, not my G7. My G7 is pre-release hardware and software, so I'm not too surprised about that. But that's the phone I have currently. The only phone I have currently that's running 8.1. So, and from Fat Produce, that's ironic that the Huawei device has the 8.1 update. So again, this is we need to be fair and we need to be even-handed. But being fair doesn't mean just being deferential. Being fair means, there can be that little bit of pushback. Oh, I love Apple products because they just work. Except for all the issues that we've had with Apple products. We need that little bit of conflict there to kind of move the needle. Because I don't like the way that these kinds of conversations go down. And I don't like that a lot of these conversations win because of marketing. It doesn't really reflect, the actual issues that people face, but it makes people feel good. You got the warm fuzzies about your expensive purchase. And you made an expensive purchase, so you're going to be defensive about that major purchase. If someone's talking crap about the car you bought, well, you bought it. You're going to defend why you got it and why you like it and why you don't. So that's why we need to not be hostile, but we do need to point these things out to our family and friends when they're making financial investments in devices that are kind of designed to be disposable after 2 years. From Renato Laporte, while my Mate 10 Pro survived long sessions of underwater photography, a brand new iPhone X died after an accidental drop in water. Yeah, dude. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, my V30 covered in bird poop. I washed it all out, cleaned it all off. Really thankful to have a better water-resistant device. But it was disconcerting how long the V30 had that warning notification that water had been detected in the USB port. That took a long time, and I even took a blower and tried to blow out any remaining moisture, and it still took a couple hours before it went away and I felt safe to plug the phone in again. I was wirelessly charging it at the time. Again, a nice perk. But yeah, the whole thing about this stuff is also being honest. Apple puts out a commercial that the iPhone is finally water resistant. That doesn't mean it's waterproof. There's no such thing. And when we make glass on glass with aluminum trim sandwich phones, it means they're going to be so much more susceptible to water in a drop that it doesn't take much to disrupt glass, crack glass, separate glass from an aluminum frame. The iPhone 8 Plus slid out of my pocket, fell less than a foot into mud, and under the concrete was under the mud, and it dented the frame. It dented the aluminum. This is really buttery, bendy aluminum, and there's only a teeny little frame around it. So great that my iPhone was water resistant. If I gingerly placed it into a puddle, it would have probably been fine. But a very common lifestyle drop, a glass on glass device, slid right out of my pocket. It wasn't like I was being, careless with it. It's that I was crouching and taking a photo with another phone to do a comparison, and it just whoop before I could do anything about it. And in fact, the iPhone X is the same way. There are all those photos of Tim Cook with his phone sliding out of his pocket in interviews because he was sitting down. So they've designed a product which doesn't survive common lifestyle abuse at all. It's incomplete. And this is what bothers me about glass on glass. But I have a whole video on this channel where I tell you about my bias as a reviewer. And you can watch that instead of me repeating all of it here on this podcast. From Cheryl, I remember someone was talking about this last week. We all need cat phones. Phone branded by Caterpillar. It's a durable construction piece of equipment. It's my cat phone. I can run over it with the steamroller. Still call my wife when I'm coming home for dinner. The phone company I really wish would make a premium phone is Kyocera. Get back to the Brigadier. Super chunky armored phone. Humongous battery. Sapphire display. I have a video on my channel where I rake concrete. I'm not gentle, like trying to do a ginger, nice little light scratch test. I have a hunk of concrete. I'm raking it over the screen. The concrete is crumbling because it's a crappy piece of concrete. It wasn't well poured concrete because I could pull up a chunk of it. It's crumbling on the display. The plastic sides of the phone are getting nicked and gouged, and there's not a mark on the screen. And that's awesome. I would love if Kyocera would drop a Qualcomm 845, humongous battery, maybe like one of these new taller 5-inch displays, maybe like a 5 to 5.5, somewhere in there, because on a taller, skinnier screen, that's still a smaller display. And then incorporate their screen vibration technology. So there was no earpiece speaker on the Brigadier. The entire screen became a tissue conduction speaker. So it wasn't the best speaker for media, but you would hold it on your face during a phone call and you could hear really well. It was great tech. You make all of that, you could make a substantially more durable device, construction grade. Parents would love it. Their kids could chuck it across the room, be far less concerned about getting damaged, be much better drop and shock protection, be much, much better water resistance than what we currently have. I think that would be killer. I would definitely pay premium cash, top tier flagship money for a Kyocera built hardcore flagship phone. It's just a shame that they've got a rep for building the cheapest of the cheap. So we have a couple last stories that I want to wrap up, getting into some politics. And again, this is just trying to keep a handle on what's going on, fingers on the pulse. And we don't have to get too much into these individual stories. But this is, again, it's an ongoing narrative that I just feel is very concerning in the world of technology today. Two stories here. So we've got China approves 5 new trademarks for Ivanka as president forges ZTE deal. So we've already seen that that President Trump is going to benefit. The Trump brand, I should say, is going to benefit from development in Indonesia, which is being backed by Chinese companies. And now Ivanka is getting several new trademarks in China for her business as we're going through this ZTE deal. The actual benefit to the United States, and I hope it is a benefit, I just don't see where it's commensurate, is also going to be, we're going to be getting some better agricultural import deal where there are going to be less tariffs on American goods coming into China, but mostly from agrarian businesses, not technology businesses. So this, to me, there's a lot of smoke here. No one's uncovered actual fire where this is quid pro quo, where this is breaking emoluments clauses or anything like that. But I just don't trust that we have an administration that's dealing in good faith for the benefit of the American people. And I think that this is going to serve to benefit Trump significantly more than the businesses that Trump is claiming to be protecting in this kind of action. On the flip side, I had some very serious concerns over how law enforcement advisories have been posted about Huawei and ZTE. And I wasn't also sure that the punitive actions taken place against ZTE on a full export ban of American technology, American hardware, and American software was necessarily the right move given the violations at play. Sanctions aren't something to mess with, and I understand why they made that move, especially after ZTE didn't fully comply with the original slate of penalties from violating those sanctions. This is a really complex story to continue following, and it's being made even more complicated by the actions of this presidential administration and the fact that he's not completely separated from the business that sports his name. I think this would be a lot less concerning if we'd seen proper divestiture, Trump properly separating himself from his brand, not employing family members who are crucial in the operation of that brand, but then also get to walk around in the White House. And the fact that we still need to have, I feel, we need to have some serious conversations about lawmakers being able to profit off of moves in the stock market and that not being considered insider trading. So the very legislative body that we elect gets to decide on regulations and rules and laws that affect the stock market, and they still get to play in the stock market. So we've got some really serious issues here that are all coming together at a head with an administration that I feel operates more selfishly, that doesn't operate in any altruistic fashion, but then not in a presidential fashion, but in a very specific way to benefit himself and his family above everybody else. And I think he's shown a clear track record of that throughout his entire business career. And what little political career we can point to, I don't think it's necessarily beyond the pale to say that this is a very selfish actor in the White House. This is from @FatProduce on in the YouTube. This is ZTE situation is the exact reason why nepotism laws exist. And there are absolutely no consequences for breaking the law in this way. If anyone is taken down for some of this, which is right now, again, I want to stress, it's at the level of unseemly behavior, and I don't believe we've seen any evidence to suggest that laws have been broken. But we should have, when you're the leader of the free world, when you're the president of the United States, I feel like we should demand a higher level of conduct than this. For all of my issues with the Obama administration, things like the whistleblower issues, drone strikes, which Trump has already apparently matched Obama for drone strikes, even though we were going to fix that problem. For all of my issues with Obama, I have to say his administration conducted itself to a much higher standard than any other presidential administration of my life, of my recent memory, definitely higher than the Clinton administration, maybe dating all the way back to a president we would consider very ineffective, like Carter. Carter is going to go down as this sort of joke of a one-term president, but we didn't have these kinds of scandals in the White House. Reagan walked into the White House with Iran-Contra baggage following him. So this is unfortunately a really bad look for American lawmakers, for the American government, for the American presidency, and for the American people. And we need to have we need to have some harder looks at this stuff. We need more sunshine. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. And so I hope that we'll get some clear answers on how all this stuff goes down. And then there's just the geek in me, my own selfishness, my own personal bias. I want to see more competition in the space, and I hope we can get it from companies like Huawei. I hope we don't see this eliminate ZTE. I really would like to see an Axon 9. I loved the Axon 7. I loved that phone. I like Huawei phones a lot. They're some of my favorite to review, and I like the PR teams that work with them. These are sort of work friendships that I've developed over all this time, and it's tough to untangle myself from that. So I definitely have sort of a personal interest in how all this stuff goes down, so long as everybody's playing by the rules. If there are actual privacy issues with a Huawei, I need to know about that, because personally I'm going to feel betrayed by the brand if there is some problem with the security on their devices. Same thing with ZTE. But, same thing with Oppo and OnePlus, same thing with Vivo, same thing with every other manufacturer, Samsung. Samsung turns around, we find that there was like a big old gaping hole in their security. I'm going to be proper pissed, because they've been winning on certain conversations, and some of them have been due to security. So the other part of this story, and this is the one that makes me even more conflicted, and I really want to get your opinion on this, people viewing this, people watching this, or people listening to this after the fact. Send me some messages on this. I have a hard time with some of these legal discussions surrounding new technology. So this is right off the AP News feed. Judge declares president cannot block critics on Twitter. A federal judge ruled Wednesday that President Donald Trump is violating the First Amendment when he blocks critics on Twitter because of their political views. U.S. District Judge Naomi Rice Buchwald in Manhattan stopped short in her written decision of ordering Trump or a subordinate to stop the practice of blocking critics from viewing his Twitter account, saying it was enough to point out that it was unconstitutional. Quote, a declaratory judgment should be sufficient as no government official, including the president, is above the law, and all government officials are presumed to follow the law as has been declared. So, I'm not sure I agree with the ruling from this judge that communication from this president on a private service, this is not public airwaves, this is not, this isn't the public's weekly radio address. They are using a private platform, Twitter, to communicate, and that this is not the official government-owned Twitter account. This is Donald Trump tweets from his own personal account, which he had from before being president. I'm not sure I agree that him blocking people on his personal account, even though he uses it to talk about public events and public information, I'm conflicted that you can compel someone to not block followers or not block individuals on that as a private institution. So, because Trump is using his public account, his personal account, as the public voice box for this administration, that makes this situation significantly more complicated. And we also need, he's the president of the United States, so literally everything he says is a matter of public interest. As much as I wish we weren't always covering some of his trollier comments, they become a part of the public conversation, and they should be cataloged and referenced as such. It's a presidential address when he says something on Twitter. So this is where I'm completely torn. This is where I really hope you guys and gals will weigh in on the conversation, because I'm not sure where we draw the line there. I really don't know. This is unprecedented. Social media has become such a force for conversation, for the dissemination of information, for democratizing and giving more marginalized players in our community a louder megaphone to voice their views too. And it's also brought to light some really unseemly elements in our society. And actually, I still think that's a good thing, because we kind of know who some of these bad actors are because they're advertising. They're publicly commenting on the internet. So where should we be able to say with fairness, because this is going to affect any rulings that we have in this will affect future elected officials too. Should we compel an elected official to use a government-owned social media account? If you're the president of the United States, does that mean you should be compelled to use the presidential Twitter account? And how ridiculous it is that we're having that conversation now. I mean, that Twitter has become such an institution in the dissemination of information, the distribution of information, and breaking news that now we have to weigh in on Twitter just as we would if Trump were writing letters to the National Enquirer, or if a president was writing angry old man editorials to the local newspaper. It's nuts that we've gotten this far. So we do have a couple comments here in the YouTube right now. From Renato Laporte, Trump is using his Twitter handle as his public account as president, so he should follow the law. Another question is if the law is fair or not. And the law is not keeping, and I mean the law, like quotes, capital T, capital L, the law, is doing a terrible job of keeping up with the rapid advances in modern technology. Our legislators and our judges are increasingly falling behind in where technology is taking us. From FE1538C, but he is a public figure and he talks about his work. That to me is just as solid an argument as any other. Tech Leathercraft, he has made it a public place to announce issues. Agreed there. From Samuel Ventimiglia, I keep mispronouncing your name. I think once he crosses the line with public interest stuff, he loses the high ground and cannot block them. From Renato Laporte, how would we feel if Trump created a private video streaming platform to talk about presidential matters while only giving access to his followers? Again, that's definitely a line we don't want to cross. And then from L2 James, doesn't that then trickle down to us to block trolls? So here's the last thing. And this is also, why rights are tricky things. And why it really sucks, because it means having to put up with bad actors, and it means we have to put up with ugly content. But the difficult thing I have is separating my own personal feelings about Trump from the protections that I hope we can all enjoy. If a president had a personal Twitter account, a future president that wasn't as divisive or wasn't as controversial as Trump, had a private account and the presidential account, I think that president should be given the benefit of being able to block people screaming at him or her on the internet. It's tough because in separating my feelings about Trump from just the process, is how do we create a fair process, which right now is being manipulated and being gamed by a very selfish individual in the White House. But reacting to him means that we set precedent for every single individual who follows him in that office. And we can't keep doing this political pendulum swing of liberals are in power, we get net neutrality. Conservatives are in power, we're going to gut your healthcare and give tax breaks to the wealthiest. We need to start sort of creating some sort of mutual meeting place of compromise, a bedrock, where we can agree on just how a civil society should conduct itself. And then we can disagree on the details. But right now, we don't even agree on what reality is. And in part because we've got a number of people that are actively trying to manipulate reality for their own individual short-term benefit, forgetting the lessons that we've learned from things like the French Revolution. So this is where I'm torn. And this is where I absolutely despise a lot of the things that Trump stands for. But I also want to say the mechanism that Twitter employs should be fairly accessible to everyone who uses Twitter in good faith. The problem is Twitter is also very inconsistent as to how they enforce their own policy. And so now we're stuck because it's a private institution and it's a private information service. It's not owned by the government. It's not owned by the people. Maybe there should be a public Twitter. Maybe there should be a public resource created by the government. Maybe the government should get involved in the social media game. I don't know what this solution is because I don't want us to overreact to Trump and potentially harm future conversations from other elected officials because of the huge hammer approach, the broadsword approach that we took to one bad actor. in the White House. And that's where this is tough stuff. And this is where I love that you have all had opinions on this, and you've been jumping into the conversation too, and that you've been sharing your thoughts on this, because I don't know what the answer is. I'm all too ready to tell you what I think the answer is for other problems. And this one, I'm proper stuck on. I don't know what to do with someone who actively abuses this platform, actively misuses their influence and their power. And I have to believe, with what little hope and optimism I have left, that future occupants of this office will not conduct themselves in the same way. If we have another string of another president, or a string of presidents that just follow suit, well, Trump could do it, so I can do it too, or I can get away with this too, well, then our society is really doomed. Like, it's over. The American economy, the American society is just done. So I have to believe, because I live here still, that eventually we'll crawl out of this muck, and we'll be better for it, and we'll be stronger for it, and we'll have better firewalls up, we'll have better protections up, we'll have smarter conversations about regulation and where areas are that we can deregulate, smarter conversations about environmental policy and protecting our resources, and smarter conversations about doing business and better diplomacy from around the world. But we got to get there first, and in the meantime, we've got to react to the problems that are currently in front of us. And I don't know how far we can push that and not do permanent damage. So that's where I'm stuck. But thank you, everybody, for dropping in your comments. Also, from Renato Laporte, what if he blocks the whole CNN crew? Then CNN wouldn't be able to cover his public announcements as well as Fox. When I see those issues, I always think about the what if, and those aren't crazy suggestions. They're not crazy suggestions, but then what happens when he's out of office? He will eventually be out of office. And will we have done damage to the current implementation and distribution of social media content because of one man? And one man who I don't think will ultimately prove to be that important to American history. From Christopher S. Mawson, Trump as a businessman should understand protocol and how to conduct himself. In business, if something has to be said, then it falls through a screening process of a public relations team first. And our government works the same way. And we've been shown time and time again that he has no interest in following those rules, that decorum, that policy. And we don't know what to do with that. We do not have a series of checks and balances in place for Twitter. Our checks and balances are, Congress and the judicial branch reining in the executive powers of the presidency. And our congressmen and women, our senators, are giving up all of those checks and balances. Like, they are woefully inept at reining in presidential powers and presidential authorities. We're really stuck, and I doubt the Supreme Court is going to be very much help because of the process it takes to get stuff up to the Supreme Court. So having a Manhattan district judge weigh in on this to say that you can't, I think might be about as far as we can get right now before the midterms. But this judge has declared that the president cannot block people, and now because of this declaration, we'll have to see if anyone follows with like a class action lawsuit on behalf of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I'm sure Trump has blocked. We'll have to see. I don't know. At some point, this will then weigh in on Twitter's terms of service. Twitter will have to create some kind of guideline, and then we'll have to see if Twitter can even apply that guideline fairly. Because I don't think they fairly apply their current guidelines when it comes to things like abuse and hate speech and the things that they say they claim they care about. I think it's pretty easy to get by a lot of Twitter's filters, and because it's such a huge monster platform, so few people actually, protecting those policies. So that last story was a bit more of a bummer than I really intended it to. But again, thank you so much for the lively conversation, the lively debate. I'm going to start doing my little wrap-up spiel here, but if there are any questions that you've got, my last bits of housekeeping this week, I'm going to be all about G7 stuff. We're going to have an episode on Newegg on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking about some Father's Day tech. I happen to be a dad, and I have some thoughts about what we can do for Father's Day gifts, because we still have some time, last-minute shopping to help your dads out there, and we can wrap that up too. I'm debating whether or not I want to finish the camera review or the full phone review for the G7. I think I'm going to go with the full phone review, put that out public on YouTube, and then wrap up the camera review, hopefully for the weekend. Get that wrapped up on Friday. Like I said, I still have a few little things that I need to finish shooting, but I finally have my daylight samples. And just a quick tease, the G7 camera is performing very well. I've really enjoyed my time shooting with it. So I think you guys are going to like some of the content out there. And then what else? Oh, and tonight at 8 p.m. Pacific, we've got our next episode of the Geek Book Club, which I host with Fat Produce, Andrew Wallace in the live chat here. And we're going back to revisit one of my favorite Star Trek: The Next Generation novels. So if you want to geek out, get your, fly your freak Trek flag, we're going to be talking about that book, Vendetta, which I had a lot of fun revisiting. There are a lot of things that when I was younger, I would watch a movie or read a book, think it was amazing, then go back as an adult and revisit it, and it doesn't live up to that. I'm going to have some fun things to say about Vendetta coming back to it. This is from Aditya Anil. Juan, did you see the Pixel 3 screen leaks? I did. I did see the Pixel 3, again, looking like Google is going to be supporting a notch 2, and I'm not terribly surprised. They purposely built Android P around the notion of supporting different screen implementations. So I'm not shocked to see it. I'm disappointed. Android handles the notch better than iOS does. I will give them credit for that, but I think it's an eyesore. I just don't think it's good design. I think it's ugly. Excuse me. Let me drink some water while I wrap these up. From FE1538C, HTC 12 Plus in the future. The HTC U12 Plus got a little explosion of videos. HTC didn't reach out to me. None of them have replied from any of my public relations PR team emails. Since I've left Pocket now, apparently I don't exist. But I do want to cover one. So I've got them on the list, but I've got the G7 to finish up. After that, I want to spend some time with the OnePlus 6. And then after the OnePlus 6, I'm going to try and revisit the P20 Pro. I never did get my hands on that to do a camera review, and I think this is going to end up being one of the most important cell phone cameras of the year. And it's already sort of out of the public discussion. So I want to revisit that and spend some time doing that. If I can get my hands on a U12 Plus for a little bit of time, it'll be after G7, OnePlus 6, and P20 Pro. At the same time, I'm still really holding out hope, fingers crossed, that we'll see a Galaxy S9 active. It's really the only Samsung I'm interested in reviewing. I mean, I do want to spend some time with a Note, but again, I'm having to buy these phones, so I'm not interested in throwing money at the regular glass-on-glass sandwich at the beginning of the year, because I don't think they're particularly interesting. I think they're good refinement, and I think they're great phones, but that's not really lighting me up as much as a Galaxy S9 Armor Edition would. To me, it's still the best conversation Samsung has. The smaller screened Galaxy with the biggest battery on any Galaxy device and much better build materials so that this is a lifestyle-proof device, a better lifestyle, a durable device. That's it. That's what we keep saying we want. We don't want the thinnest phones. We don't want brittle glass material. This is it. And then no one talks about it. So the Galaxy S9 Active, I hope, becomes a thing. We haven't seen anything crossing through the FCC, and usually it would be out in the summer. So I'm really nervous about that. And if we never get it, then I guess the only Samsung I might try and get my hands on to review will be the Note at the end of the year. And we'll see where we end up there. Let me get back. From Aditya, does the dual front camera in Pixel 3 mean an Android version of Face ID? We'll have to see. We'll have to see what Google does to implement an Android, baked into Android, the Android operating system, Face Unlock. And if it is, then I think that could work really well. I mean, I think there is some benefit to having depth sensing, matched image sensors. It'll be better for things like portrait modes. Some of those hardware-based portrait mode things I think still work better than just outright software manipulation. Having that combination of software and hardware is, I think, the best of both worlds. So if we want the most secure version of a Face Unlock, then I think improving the hardware on that is probably something that'll help move the needle. From Fat Produce, I bet HTC only has so many made to share. Oh, poor for HTC. The U12 Plus looks like a great step in the right direction. This is what kills me about the current conversation. When a tech reviewer only goes out there to say worth it or not worth it, watch my video on bias. I have a video on youtube.com/JuanBagnell, my smartphone bias. And this is one of the conversations I have in that video. This is a huge problem with the state of smartphone reviews. When a hip, savvy, cool, young, techie YouTuber at the end of his video comes out and is like, hey, better luck next time. It's not worth it. It's not good enough. These things are deal breakers. You're not reviewing a gadget. You're not. You're reviewing what the gadget isn't. And you're saying the gadget is not a Pixel, the gadget is not a Galaxy, the gadget is not an iPhone, so it's not worth it for the monies. That is not how you review a product. That's an implied comparison. You're comparing it to something you have already declared the winner. And you're saying that because I already declared that the Galaxy is a winner, the iPhone is a winner, the Pixel is a winner, this phone is not worth it. That's wrong. We should all be striving to try and find who this gadget is the right fit for. So, a phone like the HTC U12 Plus might be a perfect fit for 50 people. But we should be able to identify who those 50 people are. We should be able to say, this is the demographic of people. If you're into this phone is going to rock your socks. Don't get a Galaxy. Don't get an LG. Don't get an iPhone. If these are the things you are into, then this phone is going to be a badass. Now, if you care about this thing, or if you like Samsung software, if you like LG's headphone jack, then don't consider this phone because. That's a different conversation than worth it or not worth it. That is a bullshit way to review a phone, and we can do better than that. From Tech Leathercraft, did you mention somewhere why you are not doing Pocket now? I'm going to be doing a separate vlog on that. Probably not this week. I'm going to have to push it because I have a ton of LG stuff that I need to finish. But probably next week, I'm just going to do a little why I left Pocket now vlog. And it's nothing bad. It was just time to move on. And I'll get into some more details in a longer form conversation there. And I don't want this to be a bad look for Pocket now. We were trying to handle this with some sensitivity, with some delicacy. But, from time to time, you're going to see these partnerships pop up. And then after that partnership is sort of lasted, after it's run its course, then it's time to move on and look at other opportunities and look at other relationships. From Mr. Is Bitcoin over? No, Bitcoin's far from over. It's just I doubt that its value is really linked to actual worth and actual value. Worth it, not worth it. Haha, Bitcoin. But I think it's a speculative technology, and the value of blockchain is really what we should be examining. And from Gabaletta, as much as I hate the notch, Apple had somewhat of a reason for it. Every other manufacturer that followed along did it for the sake of having one, and glad Samsung and HTC didn't follow that trend. I think a lot of people would agree with you there. From Aditya, genuinely enjoyed the bias video you released. Identifying whom the phone is meant for is pivotal in diversifying the market. It is something more reviewers should try to adopt. I definitely agree with that, Aditya. From Vinny, on the topic of Pocket Now, are you staying on the PN Weekly? We're in conversations about how the podcast is going to move forward, but over June, I'm going to have a ton of coverage that I'm going to be producing for Computex and for E3. So I'm going to be taking a brief hiatus from the podcast, and I think over that time, we're going to have conversations as to whether or not I come back on the PN Weekly, or if they're going to find another host. If they find another host, I'm going to be very active in trying to find someone that I think is going to be a good fit for that audience, because I really enjoyed my time hosting the PN Weekly. I think that's going to wrap us up for questions. So, folks, that's all the housekeeping stuff. Again, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I love these chats that we get to have every week, mostly on Monday mornings, but anytime there's a 3-day weekend, I'm going to take my 3-day weekend. I need my me time. I need my beauty time. I need my beauty rest. And I had a lovely time with family and friends and playing with my daughter and my wife. And we had a cousin we went to go get burgers and dogs with, and it was really good times yesterday. So I hope everyone was able to find a little time, a moment, some self-reflection, just to take a breath, unplug a little bit. If you could find some sunshine, or if you find some good food, find some good friends, then I hope that was a good fit for you all. I'm going to be back next week with the SGGQA. I can't even say the name of my own podcast. I should probably change the name of my podcast. The SGGQA podcast, Monday Morning Tech Chat. Be on the lookout for Newegg Now Thursdays, where we're going to be having some fun conversation about tech for dads for Father's Day. And of course, all of the links below these videos where you can support production on my channel, including that Patreon page. I am protecting those camera and audio reviews. Oh, and that's another thing. I did do a master list on SomeGadgetGuy.com. If you go to my website, SomeGadgetGuy.com, there is a master list of every single camera review I've ever produced, dating back to 2012. So if you want to see how a Galaxy Note 2 compares to an LG V30, you totally can. Very consistent setups, very consistent, lighting conditions, tests for different flowers and colors and macro distances and transitions and stuff like that. So all of that's in one place now. But moving forward, new videos for camera reviews and audio reviews will be on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. And I really support the people that are supporting production there. Like I said, 77 subscribers on Patreon are almost matching what I make on YouTube. So that's a community that's trying to help me produce this content. That's a community that I want to help support too. And that's where this podcast will eventually be ad-free, is on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. So you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet. That is at SomeGadgetGuy on Instagram, on Twitter. I do have a Facebook page, though I kind of hate Facebook. And I hope you guys will join those conversations, shoot me messages, share this content, share this podcast with people who enjoy tech podcasts. And I will catch you next week on the Monday Morning Tech Chat. Be well.